Hey, everybody. I'm trying to avoid, getting stuck behind here. Is it working? No.
I'm Anthony. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's my friend Glenn.
You're watching the #1 show in hospitality. Hey, everybody. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. I'm Glenn Hausman. Anthony Melchiori is on assignment today, so he won't be here. But don't worry. Got a great guest today. And also, I've got a lot of different partners. I work with Anthony here on No Vacancy Live. I work with Craig Sullivan, of course, at Friday Night Audit, our great show. And I happen to have a great friendship, partnership, and do some fun stuff with our guest today. We're just going to get right into it, aren't we? Mr. Sean Worker, T5 Strategies. You might know
Good
him
to
from
see you.
the book, The Adapters, which I helped him create over there. And, of course, he's the man in all of Europe and, dare I say, maybe even Asia, too. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, I think we'll stick with Europe. They only can. I'm not too sure they'd put up with me anymore. That was many years ago. But it's good to see you. And the thing I love about the Sting, is that God, you had a massive head of hair.
I used to have massive head of hair. It's going away though. It's very sad.
No, I just think you still got a bunch of hair, and it still looks great. And
unfortunately,
and
it's as I lose more up here, it's growing in
cool.
weird places now, which is very uncomfortable to deal with. But what are you going to do?
Well, I'm sure there's an amenity for that in a hotel that you travel to. So I think it'll be great.
I'm sure there is. So I don't know what's going on in your world, Sean, but I will tell you, here in the United States, it seems like travel is really, really increasing in a real meaningful sort of way, right? I'm looking at TSA's numbers. Just yesterday, we had over 2 million people traveling, and the day before, we had 2.2 million people traveling. And here, it's at or about, sometimes a little bit lower than what people were doing on this date ish in 2019. But I got to tell you, I don't think that has to do with demand. I think that has to do with not enough pilots, not enough aircraft, and all of that kind of stuff. So here, I'm feeling pretty good about overall travel. You're in Europe. You focus on that. Tell us a little bit about some of the vibes that you're seeing in the greater European area.
The good news is people are people wherever they live, and they want to go see things.
I thought you were going to start singing Depeche Mode there for a second.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I feel that vibe coming on completely on the Spotify list. So I think a couple of things that's important.
Yeah,
is recovery. This recovery is not at all like the Great Recession. Right. This is staggered and has all different underlying issues that are associated with. So what the heck does that mean? It means that we're getting this in waves. Wave one was what happened in the US and elsewhere, which was,
I thought you were talking about some shrooms I took back in
pent up
college.
demand.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, obviously they're still working. They were impressive. Wow, there's a tale.
Yeah.
And so, in Europe, Europe is made up of 27 countries, and each has a different demand pattern. But what is consistent, if you kind of think, is Southern Europe in the Floridian sense against Northern Europe, which would be in the Bostonian sense, where Dublin and the UK, everybody wants to go south, and everybody they got a list and they want to do it. And the other part, it's compounded.
Right.
It's compounded with, I want to do short stay. There's about 10 places I wanted to go. I didn't go and want to get them in as quickly as possible. The second influencer for a certain class of labor is the work from home.
Right.
And that gives you a lot of flexibility. There's other parts, which I think is certainly embodied, and probably a great representation is my niece is a developer. Her husband is a IT, both developers. They work in Stockholm, and their company decided that as part of their perk, they could work somewhere in Europe, out of Sweden during the winter, and go anywhere for a month.
Right.
As long as it was attached somewhere where they have a distribution system. That's a whole new form of extended travel that was not there before. That's very common in Europe with this kind of north-south. And the fourth thing is that we are really seeing, the short haul airlines here are very efficient. And so their capacity is just through the roof. and every flight I've been on has been packed. And I don't think that's going to change in the foreseeable future.
Well, that's really good. So, I want to talk a little bit about those haves and have-nots. You said there are 27 countries in Europe. It's kind of the same deal over here. Substitute countries for states. There's definitely states that have and states that have not as much. Here in the United States, some of the larger cities that don't that are not Las Vegas or Orlando seem to have a little bit more trouble when it comes to meetings, events, group business, and even transient business travel. Are you seeing the same sort of thing between the cities that we might be familiar with, London, Paris, et cetera, versus some of the smaller outside the mainstream cities?
The lists go on. Now, obviously, the events are back in vogue. They will be, because we like to gather and we learn when we gather.
Right.
We've also learned that this medium that we use, that you and I are using all the time, is very efficient, and it is absolutely blurring. We used to talk about that, business leisure thing. Now it's blurred in a different sort of way. People are adding on the trip, but it's not necessarily the trip to Paris. It's the trip to Lyon. It's the trip to, not to Florence, but a small village in Tuscany. It's going to Croatia. It's going to, these places that aren't the normal run-of-the-mill, check the box with the tour group, has made a very interesting thing. I mean, Andrea and I, my wife, we went to a town in Portugal we never knew existed, called Aveiro.
Right.
And Aveiro is, as the Portuguese will classify it, is kind of like the Venice of Portugal. Well, it has many beautiful canals. It's as clean as a whistle. It's very inexpensive, a great experience. We didn't know about it, and it was really packed. So that sort of town is what is attracting meetings, and it's also attracting, because of the experience basis that we've all become accustomed to, we want to add on here.
Why, though? Why have people changed their habits and are exploring new cities for meetings and events as opposed to the ones that we've always been going to throughout our careers?
I think some of it is price. Some of it is the fact that these cities have upped their game. They've determined that they need to be competitive. There's been also a shift in awareness of other places. So if you kind of think back to this far distant memory of the pandemic,
right,
the travelers themselves are the ones saying, I need to do something different than the normal run of the mill. And we think of just the millennial class. Well, the millennial class is very much the decision makers today. So they're making some decisions that say, I want to go to a smaller town, more intimate. I'm not getting overrun. The pricing is better and the experience is better for my team. And especially if they're working remotely, they come together in an interesting place, which also helps with the retention of their teams, because they're getting something different out of it. And that retention value is what is still pressing. You look at the numbers. In the US with the jobs report last week, the largest gainer and growth in the labor category was hospitality. 120 odd thousand or so added to the workforce. That's happening over here as well, as this rotation occurs out of the pandemic. So there's a whole new mix of travelers with disposable income, and the labor numbers are very positive.
That's interesting in regard to the labor numbers. I'm starting to see the same thing. And you and I, when we've done content together in the past, and we talked about adapting and innovating, and of course, you can still get the adapters right now at Amazon.com by Sean Worker. My name's on that book as well. Go ahead and get that. But one of the things that I'm thinking, sorry, I got a cat that's running around like crazy over here. That's very distracting. So one of the things that I find interesting is we were saying a lot of these people have left the business, but in the last couple of weeks, months, I'm starting to see people now saying, well, maybe I do want to go back to hospitality. Maybe that job in that warehouse that we all order from isn't what I expected it to be. Are you seeing now people come back to the industry, or are you starting to see maybe that next generation of workers come in, or probably somewhere the answer's in the middle?
I'm not too sure it's in the middle. It's just that, I think those of us that have been in the hospitality business for a long time, the community, and we talk about experiences and community, and that's all what the guests are looking for too. That's what the employees are doing. And those that can make a choice and say, you know, I want to go back to that because I had my friends.
Hmm.
It was they're a great bunch of people. That tribe is where I belong. Maybe now it's a choice as opposed to that's the only place I can get a job.
Right.
And that's very powerful, making a choice. The second thing is that there's others that are outside of
Hmm.
the world of hospitality. Some healthcare workers,
Right.
that you can see a rotation out of healthcare.
Mhm.
That sort of, if you're, you know, doing something in healthcare, maybe it's nursing, you're seeing nurses, you know, changing. You're seeing teachers move out of being teachers and wanting to be into something different and social that they can just go home afterwards. So
Yeah, that
I
makes sense.
think there's other spaces
Mhm.
that are now being attracted to say, oh, I
Right.
can work at a front desk, and that's
That's
kind of
interesting.
fun. I
Yeah,
can help
that's really
people,
interesting
that's kind
'cause
of fun.
At least here in the United States, is a big political thing that's attacking a lot of the teachers and the curriculum. And they're like, I'm already being paid crap. Why do I need to put up with that kind of stuff? So it's interesting that that might actually be feeding into the ability for hotels and other hospitality industry businesses to be able to get some folks in there. But why do you think that's happening in Europe, Sean? Because of course, what I'm thinking is that it's
Mm.
more of a quote unquote socialist kind of society over there in a lot of European countries. Like in France, jobs are protected, et cetera, et cetera. So if that's the case, what am I missing that people are still so unhappy that they want to change careers and move on?
So, you know, I'll come back to the socialist pit in a
Yeah,
bit because I just have to.
yeah, of course.
Is that, you know, the piece that I think people are people and people leave managers, they
Hmm.
don't leave companies. If you got a terrible manager, you can't put up with that.
Hmm.
The people want to be around people that actually appreciate what they're doing, that they're going to learn something from that. They may advance in that. The other part that managers are adjusting to, that everybody doesn't want to be the manager anymore.
Hmm.
And so whether that's in America or throughout Europe,
Hmm.
I mean, obviously there's, you know, 400 million people here, you know, 340,
Right.
350 in the
Almost here
US.
too. Yeah. Mhm.
You know, these are, you know, there's bodies of people that people want to be around something that they feel they can make a difference. There's a purpose behind the company. So I think that's common between both continents. The second thing I would say is that it is about lifestyle. You know, when is enough enough? When you look at housing costs, when you look at space, space is now more expensive. And coming off the recession, less possession seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
And coming off the pandemic, going out and doing things is important, having the time to do it. So hospitality, if we can figure out a couple of things, like which we're seeing, is that we've got two problems in hospitality: the work from home class and the work from work class. So work from, what I mean by that is a chef cannot prepare a meal virtually. They
Right.
can, but it's probably not going to help the breakfast buffet in the morning.
Yeah.
But the
Also, won't
accounting
taste very well.
department,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
no, it won't taste very well. But, you know, I'm sure we're working on some tech for that. You know, a screen
Yeah.
near you will happen. At the end of the day, you want to work with great people, but equally, you know, a general manager of today, and I just got off a call and I've just had about 5 or 6 conversations about this,
Right.
that the general manager of today needs to broaden their mind and go, who can work from home? What jobs can be done from home? What sort of tasks can be done from home, like reservations, like
Mhm.
accounting, like yield management and revenue management?
Mhm.
So that the jobs that people aspire to, they may come in from a work from work perspective. I'm making a bed. I am helping, you know,
Mhm.
as a concierge. Now they have job opportunities in the hotel for the first time ever that says, if I become an accounts receivable clerk
Mhm.
or I become something else, I can work from home. That choice was never there before. So that is an opportunity. I think our space can attract great people that
Mhm.
want flexible lives and do a great job at different days of, you know, time of
Yeah.
days. And
All right. So let me
I think
ask
we
you
really
your
need to get on that
opinion.
bandwagon.
Yeah. Let me ask you your opinion on this. I've never asked this question before. With that scenario happening, if I want to be a general manager or man at the front desk and stuff like that, is the average person going to get kind of annoyed that their career track is different and they have to come in every day, where that revenue manager or the billing person gets to stay home? And is that going to cause discord within the workplace, do you think?
Well, the first thing is to be aware that that discord is there and could be there, even
Already.
magnitude of a magnitude already,
Mhm.
and that it's about us reframing what a hotel is, or a service department, or an alternative accommodation, where it's okay to work from home. And then it's about career pathing. Hey, you came in as part of the concierge group.
Right.
Well, where do you want to be? Well, I want to work from home. What jobs are available that I can work from home from? Well, there's a list of them. Well, which one are you interested in? Then start to build that path towards being capable and earning that job, and give them a chance to expand their life and have a better quality of life. And that brings loyalty, and that brings education. It brings, we used to call it cross training. What a great cross training to say, look, there's a reward for this. So it's about framing the thinking and being an employer that can then attract others from multiple classes. We talked about teachers, we talked about healthcare. These are all applicable roles that professionals can make just as much or more in a very different environment that's fun. You've got the camaraderie, there's parties, there's fun, and it's a great bunch of people. So it may be the first time that there's a more of a horizontal approach to career planning and career choicing and recruiting than there ever was before, than, recruiting from the same, pot. And this is a big opportunity for us, and I hope we don't squander it.
Is there more of an opportunity for countries that have elected to be within the EU versus those that have never been part of it, or those that might have said, we're out of here, no longer part of the EU, UK?
Well, there's very few of them.
Yeah.
So I
know.
I'll go with this. I'll go with this. We are, if you think of it in the simplest of terms, it's the United States of Europe, right?
Right.
Every market is interdependent. The European Union has become even more interdependent. It's very easy to move around. All the goods and services, it's very easy to move around. And so that's a huge advantage for such a major bloc from a buying power. But it's not really outside or inside. I won't get into the trade tariffs and all that sort of stuff. That's way beyond my pay grade. But the interesting thing about where we are today in hospitality is between certainly the US and Europe, capital is fluid. Asset managers are going to have to work much harder than they used to in the last 10 years or so to maximize the value of the asset and really dig into operations.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Came off yeah. Great. So, those issues are common, and capital finds its own water level, and there's a lot of cash, and there's debt that has to be handled. So all of that is going to influence the structure of a building. It's going to influence the structure of the labor force. It's going to influence the number of people that an asset can support.
Right.
So it's up to the, like I always said, when I was in ops and running businesses in hospitality, you could always tell the great hotels within 3 or 4 minutes, or any type of alternative accommodation, by the general manager. If the GM is good, you can feel it within minutes. It's clean, it's got a good vibe, regardless of the brand. And I hope the general managers of today, and there's many, many wonderful GMs, are shaping their thinking, particularly if they're north of 35, that this is a new era, and learning those skills. And if you've got great people skills, you probably don't need to worry. But if you're probably thinking about what was before, those days are over.
Right. All right. So I got a quick question for you from our friend Daniel over there. Sean, isn't inflation still stressing small business growth, or are people still spending at any cost?
That's a straightforward question.
Yep.
So let's go with a straightforward answer. Inflation has been with us for a long time in one form or other. Sometimes it's high, sometimes are low. Where we are is in a particular period where we're all keenly aware of our living expenses having gone up. That being said, there's still lots of value out there. There's marginal changes. I mean, I'm on a plane frequently.
Yeah.
And it's gone up a little bit, but it's still great value. You can still find great deals out there. And the inflation component, as it now sets a new watermark, there's an upside in inflation too. It is the fact that this hospitality space was able to then push pricing that we've never seen before. Now the question is, can the space hold their pricing, which they need to do. So then as inflation just simply stabilizes and the cost of goods stabilize, this will benefit the category overall, especially if we get rid of some of the silly services that wasn't any value in the first place.
Right.
So at the individual level, hopefully your wages are going up appropriately and your salaries are going up appropriately, but this is starting to level out. It may take a little bit longer. I'm not a central banker, so I won't refer to that.
Yeah, of course.
But the positive aspect of inflation has actually helped us move pricing up to a place that it can be sustainable over the medium term,
Well,
as we
I
then
hope so.
adjust the input costs.
Yeah,
The input costs need to get adjusted.
Yeah, because what we're seeing right now, the input cost, you mean by the fixed costs that you have over there, cost of goods,
No,
services, and that sort of thing?
I'm more talking about the soft services versus the hard costs, like the pressure that's on debt, which inevitably hits the balance sheet and inevitably hits the value. But I'm talking about the input costs of making that asset run.
Right.
It could be supplies for kitchens, it could be power, it can be all of the inputs to get the day-to-day stuff that affects a P&L rather than a balance sheet. So that will level out, and then we'll get to a new dip or a new crest, depending on what happens in the next 18 months. Ironically enough, this can be a positive for the hospitality sector as long as we hold our grip on where we sit today.
Yeah. All right. So in that case, what are asset managers thinking about? What are they most concerned about? And are asset managers, I guess to start, typically at the larger types of hotels as opposed to, like, let's just say Best Western plus in Cannes,
So anybody who's an owner is an asset manager. And then there's a professional class of asset managers as you move through the ecosystem. So I'd love to start with, the Best Western. If I own a Best Western, I'm managing an asset and I'm running an asset. If I have two Best Westerns, and now I'm running one maybe, and I've got somebody else, a friend or a trusted GM running the other, they've got the same issues, just on a smaller magnitude, that's dealing with two sides. One, what is their debt structure currently? And if they're leveraged reasonably, they're probably not too worried. But if you're stretched, or you've got a note that's due in the next year or so with the way interest rates are, that's going to be very complicated.
Right. So
get ahead of that now and really work with your lender. And then when you're running your input costs, negotiating with suppliers has been with us since the beginning of time.
Right.
It's time to have those conversations and be active about changing suppliers if you're not getting what you want. So there's this activity and being active both on the debt side and the input side. And you can take that all the way up to the Diplomat that was just sold there. And I'm sure the Dell family are going to go, how do we make that asset more efficient?
Right.
Or do we want it to be at another level? So they're going to have a professional at that. And that professional needs to dig into the P&L and work their way through the P&L to inspire, not micromanage, to inspire a different approach to getting the input costs to the most reasonable level. Right. And working hand in glove with the management staff and not being a dictator.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that's one of those things that I don't think people look at again. And I learned this lesson, even though I don't operate hotels, from our friend Chris Green, now president over at Remington Hotels. Every year, he would take a look at all of the expenses when it comes to the people supplying products and services to his hotel and think about renegotiating them, finding new vendor partners, all of that kind of stuff. And that really does help keep control of expenses. It also keeps companies in check that might have been gotten too lazy and think your business is ultra guaranteed as opposed to having to be continually earned.
Yeah. And, supply chains have been dramatically impacted in how they're driving efficiency. We hear the big headline terms like onshoring and offshoring.
Right.
But what does that mean? It means we're bringing manufacturing back closer. We're finding different supply chains are farmers that are local versus farmers that are not local.
Right.
And you build those relationships. So if those costs are being now redefined from bringing from China versus bringing it to let's say, a manufacturing plant
Right.
in Croatia or in Spain.
Right.
Well, you've just taken out a couple of thousand nautical miles of tankers and containers. So, the local buyers need to get involved and say, hey, it got closer. Now let's talk about price.
Right.
It's so, this needs to be actively managed, and to go back and say, okay, can we mix sustainability into this? And can we drive a circular economy locally? And locally may be within a certain region, but it's certainly not now in China.
Right.
Maybe it's closer.
Right.
And, let's have that meaningful conversation about two things. One, some asset managers are aware of stranded assets being on their books in 2030 and 2050. Others aren't even thinking about it, or they just wait till later. But one thing is for sure, the general manager and group buyers and group and area general managers or area vice presidents have an immense amount of work ahead of them to take those efficiencies from the supply chain and actually be, as a buyer, be rewarded for working closely with that supplier, but you want some of the benefits, and there's no harm in asking for that.
Right. All right. So what about in terms of revenue management? People spend to be happy. Mr. Cards is saying, we got you. We know who you really are. As long as you appreciate the value. Are you finding that in general across the wider European continent? And how should revenue managers deal with that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I was fortunate to be at the Catalyst for Conversion conference with the Global Revenue Forum last week in London.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to cover that, and then did 14 interviews with some great people.
Yeah, you did some great stuff, and it made me really jealous. I wasn't there, by the way, just for the record.
Yeah, it was fun. And I will tell you, it was tribal. I mean, there was such a beat to that event, and everybody was on their game. All the panels, it was very impressive. Ali Northfield was running that. So here's what I'd say. One of the question marks that came up is, how relevant will a revenue manager, revenue director be in the future? It's been out there for a while, but ChatGPT and the AI element of that's in our businesses already, has the ability to address a lot of these matters. So what the question is, what relevance is a yield manager? Well, the general conclusion was that it's super relevant, and depending on how you look at that role. One is, it is complex with a lot of complex tech, and it's very disjointed and it's fragmented. So somebody's got to land the planes.
Right.
Secondly, if you shape that job differently, they can yield the asset. What are we doing to do something more effective than have, a 100 square meter lobby that does nothing except have some very nice designer furniture that you sit on while you're waiting for somebody or ready to check in or check out, which doesn't seem pretty good.
No, you want to activate
Secondly,
that
it's not
space.
good for the environment.
Right.
Let's activate the space. Secondly, when you think of, if you ask a GM, what's the occupancy per square meter or the occupancy of your event space, I'd be surprised if you get past 25%. So how are you going to activate that space and decide? And then finally, when you look at pricing, and we've all eaten out, we've seen the prices go up.
Oh, dude,
we've
seriously,
seen
it's out of control here. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's the same everywhere, and you just scratch your head. And food prices last month in this part of the world went up 16% in the grocery store alone. So you look at that, how that's being passed on, really rethinking what is yielding the asset and getting somebody that is the director of revenue management and yield management into the conversation. And the other question I asked, which I was really shocked at, is how often is the yield manager or the revenue manager invited to the executive committee meetings? And without question, it was, let's put it at rare. I think it's time to change that.
Yeah.
They, the great leaders in that space and thinkers is adding a lot more value than you think, and they're getting the insight. It's like not asking, the chief of the boat, what's going on with the submarine, when the captain thinks, or the commander thinks, I got all the answers, I don't need to. And the military do a very good job of knowing that the NCOs and the lieutenants and the captains are the one that run
Right.
the whole ship.
Yep.
And so, I think we need to go down a layer, and the revenue managers are a key component, I think, of the next 10 years.
I agree with you. Let me agree 100% and add in, yeah, we got ChatGPT and stuff like that, but is that really going to be able to compensate for human beings starting to really understand the overall value of specific customers, for example? I see us really looking at more than not just trying to get the best rate on room, but trying to get the most revenue per individual human being that walks through the door, and better understanding that you also want to sell them food, drinks, spa services, or whatever your particular hotel might offer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great theme, Glenn, and thanks for bringing that up. Is when we look at other industries, and we love doing that at the Adapters, look over the fence, and you and I have talked about this all the time and wrote about it.
Yep.
Is that look at other industries as to how they think about share of wallet. We all use Amazon. If you like this, you'll love that.
Right.
Okay. So they press up in front of you other types of products that you will probably like based on your purchase data and your search data. You look at fashion. Fashion does the same thing. They are at, in fast-paced fashion, they grab mood very quickly, and they change the product, and they show you like type product. And in the old days, they'd show you a mannequin and say, if you like that sweater, it'll go with this sweater,
right,
or this pants. We don't do that. And I tried to do this on a couple of the major sites this week about trying to book meeting space. I tried to book a restaurant reservation on some of the big guys. You can't do it. So why? Maybe it's antiquated PMS systems. I couldn't book parking. So you look at the circle of uses. Can I book a restaurant? Can I book a plate? Could I book a small table at this really cool cocktail bar that I want to make sure I've got that seat? I can't do that.
Right.
It's very hard to buy ancillary services in the hospitality industry.
Interesting.
On your own.
You're right.
I was in Portugal 2 weeks ago, and part of a group, and I actually had to call the salesperson because the code would not be accepted on the website for that group, and she emailed me back with my confirmation email for something that is a task. So we've got a lot of low-hanging fruit to drive the value in the P&L. And optimize the asset. And that's where someone like the yield director could easily be in charge of core plus experiences and make it easy to book and drive share of wallet. Glad you brought that up.
It's interesting. Let me take that a step further. I love what you're saying, because you're really missing out on valuable insights and data that'll get you to really understand your customer. Because I've had opportunities where it's like, I can't book that hotel restaurant through the hotel. I have to go to a third-party service like OpenTable or whatever that might be. And I sure as hell know that the data that they're getting from OpenTable is not connected to the data of me as a hotel guest. And they have no knowledge of where I'm eating, what I'm having, or how to create a better experience for more that'll yield them more profitability.
That's true. And, look, we all know of your great reputation in the US. It's over here too, about you're the king of Vegas and #1 podcast and influencer. It's pretty clear, and rightly so. And you've got a great podium to bring this out, and to look over the fence and to integrate these services that other apps found the gap and said, great, OpenTable, we're going to aggregate every type of seating for food, and we're going to make it easy for the user guest to use. And I'm still scratching my head why my hotel friends aren't embracing that to a large extent. Some are.
Agreed. But some are. Right now, we're in the phase of everyone saying they're technology companies, but not yet actually knowing how to be a technology company. That's kind of where I think we're at right now.
Yeah, you know what? And nobody needs to be a technology company. They need to be tech-enabled.
Right.
So that, we're in the hotel business or we're in the hospitality business, and we're using a box, and there's all sorts of boxes. We're optimizing those boxes, and, we make fun, very different types of boxes.
Mhm.
But in order for the pathway to get there, you don't have to write your own tech. There, you can assemble the tech and the tech stack in a very efficient way to drive the experience you want
Right.
at the right price at the right time for your type of guest. And lots of great companies are doing it out there, and even companies like Hopper that are not a tradition. They're an OTA. You can't book online. They're behind the scenes. They're enablers. But they even hedge the cost of it of a room, right? If you buy it now, it may go up in the future, but
Right.
if it goes up in the future, we'll cover you against it. That's the sort of fintech OTA merging that is far more complicated. They're using AI for that, which then, it's a natural extension to be able to add on other services so that the share of wallet, and I go back to share of wallet, this is not an unusual concept. It's been out there
Right.
for
We've been talking about that for a while. Yeah.
forever, right? Is that how do we maximize share of wallet and by definition then drive down the cost with our supply chain to deliver a better price at the right time for the right experience? Because we keep talking about experiences. Well, we got to make it easy. Why aren't we able to book, the big bus ticket with a leap off? But you see that on credit card services. Credit card services say, hey, we're going to transfer you to another page, and this is where you can get an airline ticket, or you can get a taxi or a rental car. If the banks can do it, surely we can.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. But the last topic I want to go back to the employment thing, because one thing that interests me is a lot of time we spend about how here you could develop your career in hospitality. And a lot of the major management companies are pushing that forward. Grow with us within our management company. You'll get lots of good opportunities. But the formula in Europe continues to be kind of the opposite here when you're talking about branded hotels versus independent hotels. Is it harder for folks in Europe, because there are so many independent hotels, to move up in their career path because of not being able to transfer within a single company and always having to go out and look for another job? And by always, I mean mostly, not literally always.
It's about framing, really. First of all, we all like to have fun.
Yeah.
And fun is wherever you can find it in the job. And if you find a fun job with a great manager, you've probably made it for a while, especially in a place you can learn. So those are the basic premise. The other thing I'd ask you to think about is that certainly based on relocation and other job research stuff that's out there, and you can find it around the place, is that when you look at how many jobs a millennial will have in their lifetime, it could be between 15 and 20 jobs.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Whereas before it would be about 12, right? You can even get there.
And I would say the generation before us, Sean, it was like maybe 2, it's like 2, that was when, right? At least here in the United States, you would join a company and spend your whole life there. When we were coming up, I think the general American zeitgeist was you don't want to hop around too much because it'll make you look like a bad employee. Whereas now the attitude is, if I don't switch jobs, they're never going to give me the money or the promotions that I deserve.
So when we think about the space, if you've dedicated yourself to hospitality, and let's for the sake of an example, you take Barcelona or you take New York.
Yes.
And there's a high concentration of hospitality assets. It's no longer about sticking with a certain company. It's actually being open from a company, say, hey, it's great that you're going to go work for Dream Hotels, now owned by Hyatt. Now that's a big opening, right? I go from Dream, and Dream was bought by Hyatt. Now there's a different career path for me. Or more importantly, I stay at a Hoxton in London. There's 50 other boutique hotels around London. I now have a pod of class of hotels that I can move around in without having to move my family.
Right.
Before it was, I'm with Marriott and I'm going to stay with Marriott and I'm going to have 2 years here and 3 years there and moving all over the world. That's not how people are looking at it. So you can grow your career in one city by moving around within a very dense offering and labor set before you even have to dream of moving and still have a good life.
Yeah.
And so it's a different way of looking at it. Your career path is not by one company, but it's about the zone you choose to live in. And that to me is a choice. And that's great. And I think the general managers and owners of companies that have that type of competition in their city
Mhm.
should really, a lot of them do, and they do a great job, is to consider thinking of this as a career path. What are you doing to stay in touch with and treat that great employee that moved on to get more experience from being a front office manager to assistant GM, half a mile away or 2 kilometers away? Are you staying in touch with that person to make sure they think of coming back to you with more experience?
Right.
And treating an employee the exact same as tracking a customer, and treating the employee the same as a customer in how their share of wallet, in other words, share of thinking, share of emotion, to stay connected to the tribe. And I'm not too sure we do a great. Some do. I was listening to Brian Proctor's
Mhm.
Tuesday's Thanks with Jeff Bellotti, and Jeff's got a great perspective on taking care of people, and so is Brian. They're both great people, people managers, and people that they love,
Right.
and it comes across. Well, you may go away, but come back, but stay in touch. So treat the employees just you would as if you were contacting and staying in touch with a guest.
Yeah, of course, Sean Worker created T5 strategies, which helps companies in the travel and hospitality sector figure out what their issues and get past them in order to make decisions and have great solutions. Sean, how can we find you? And maybe why not plug this little bad boy, the adapters, while you're at it?
Oh, look at that. The more I think about it, that was great. And now I feel like we need an update. So an update will
Right.
be in the running, but certainly it's about adaptation and innovation. We definitely support that and cover that with Adapters Tech X, and soon to be Adapters Green X, and the expert series, where we help companies out there become experts and demonstrate that through our media and how we create that storytelling for them. So there you are.
Great. Find that at theadapters.net or t5strategies.com. Sean, thanks so much for being here.
And
Appreciate you, man. Yeah,
I have to say this before we go.
of course.
You're doing an amazing job of connecting all of us,
Thanks.
and it's a credit to you and the team. And may it long continue.
Thanks, man. I think it's pretty awesome that so many people that I affiliate with, work with, are all kind of getting together and becoming friends and creating a collective amongst ourselves. It's really a lot of fun to see and experience. Sean, thanks again for being here. Do me a favor, hang out backstage just for a minute. All right. Cool. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. And of course, I'm just trying to find the right graphic to bring up because I'm unprepared. Now I am prepared. Find our podcast here on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get your shows. Well, we are there. And if you're listening to us right now, why not take a look at our pretty faces? All right. I'm judging myself and giving myself the benefit of your doubt. You judge our handsomeness by giving us a watch on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are. Glad I made Dr. Producer Suzanne laugh with that one. He's at Anthony Hotels. Now she's just shaking her head. Oh, God, I'm traveling Glenn. Thanks so much for being here. Remember, guys, you've got one life, so blaze on. And as Anthony says, be kind to yourself. See you all tomorrow.